This is the Inspection Pro Joe podcast, where we break down everything you need to know to grow a successful home inspection company. Join hosts Joey and Jake as they share insider knowledge and chat with the industry's best on how to take your business to the next level.
All right, welcome back to Inspection Pro Joe. Today we have with us Stephanie Jaynes, the Marketing Director at InspectorPro Insurance. We are very happy to have you here with us today, Stephanie.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be
we're
here.
really excited to have you, Stephanie. And I know that, when we get our guys licensed to be inspectors, one of the insurance requirements is, and it's just general liability insurance. But I always tell people, or especially realtors, you want an inspector that doesn't just have general liability, but errors and omissions insurance as well. And what, since you're on the insurance side, what's your perspective on that? And how important do you think errors and omissions is to our industry? And why do you think it's not a requirement in some states that inspectors also need that as well?
So these are all great questions and ones we're prepared to answer since we sell errors and omissions, general liability, and workers' comp, all catered to home inspectors. And I think the first thing that's important to note before we dive into why they're important is how they're different. General liability that you mentioned, that covers inspectors if they cause property damage or bodily harm during their inspection. The most common ways to do that, you're putting your foot through the ceiling, you're testing the water, like in the sink or the tub, you walk away, it overflows, you cause water damage. You crash your drone into somebody. I mean, these are the types of claims we see on the general liability side. Now, general liability insurance is absolutely important because general liability insurance, usually if you're getting a general liability claim, it is your fault. You did something wrong. You made a mistake, and people want you to pay for it. Especially on the bodily injury side of things, those claims can get extremely expensive if you're causing harm to somebody during your inspection. And like I said, with water damage being one of the more common general liability claims, if you are causing a leak that damages a bunch of the property, that can be expensive too. So it's definitely an important thing to have, and it is one of the more common state requirements. Now, errors and omissions or professional liability insurance, that has to do with mistakes that you potentially make in your reporting. This is when you're getting claims for negligence, for missing something or leaving something out of your report. The most common claims are, again, water damage. Hey, I have water stains all over the wall of this house that I just bought. We ripped open the drywall. There's tons of stuff in there. There's mold. You didn't catch it. You didn't see it. And what's interesting is errors and omissions claims are actually the most common type of claim. So if you're carrying insurance to protect your business from potential financial impacts from making mistakes, you're really going to want to carry errors and omissions because it's tens of times more common. The other thing that's interesting is, unlike general liability claims, where I would say over 90% of the general liability claims we receive, the inspector did do something wrong. 80% of the errors and omissions claims that we receive are what we would call meritless or frivolous claims, meaning the inspector is being accused of something that he shouldn't actually be getting accused of. Mm-hmm. A really great example is a mold claim. Hey, I was doing renovations. I ripped out a wall. There's mold all over it, all over the inside of it. Well, we all know that a home inspection is just a visual, non-invasive examination. How in the world were you supposed to see mold in the wall? And mold is excluded by a lot of inspectors in their agreements. But a lot of clients don't really care about that or don't acknowledge that. So they're still filing claims and you're still having to respond to them, especially if they've hired an attorney and things. So that's why errors and omissions gets to be really important is A, they're really common. B, they're often meritless or frivolous. So regardless of how fantastic an inspector you are, you can still get sued. It doesn't need to be something you genuinely did. And C, they can take longer and need more invasive action to really defend, especially if they're coming up a long time later, even 6 months to a year later. Past can be very different at that point. So having the tools and the ability to respond in such a way where you nip it in the bud before you have to get into a courtroom or an arbitration situation, for the least money possible, ideally $0 for you. That's why it's important to carry errors and omissions insurance. As for why,
I have a quick question.
Go ahead.
Not to cut you off, but two, what are the standard deductibles for general liability and errors and omission?
So I'll explain what a deductible is first.
Go into what a deductible is.
A deductible, so a deductible is the amount of money you owe when the insurance company handles a claim for you. Now, I put an asterisk by owe, because depending on who your insurance provider is and how they handle it, your deductible is going to be different. So here at InspectorPro, we don't collect the deductible until we are already working on it, oftentimes at the end. And the reason that we do that is we don't want to charge you your deductible unless we actually need it. Mm-hmm. If we are able to get rid of your claim for less than the cost of your deductible, you owe that lesser amount. If we're able to get rid of it for $0, other than our costs, like our internal like claims adjusters and things like that, we'll charge you $0. So that's why I say there's an asterisk by that. Now, that's not common practice.
Oh, I know it's not. Yeah.
It's more common.
That's awesome you do.
That deductibles are something called self-insured retentions, SIRs. And what that means is the insurance company says, hey, the second you file a claim, I need that deductible. I'm not going to make any phone calls. I'm not going to talk to you about it. I'm not going to file it with the carrier. I'm not going to do anything until you pay me that money. And the reason that they do that a lot of times is because, they're worried that it's going to cost more, or maybe they're a smaller shop. So the ability for them to respond without money in the bank already is limited. Mm-hmm. But why that can be difficult is A, claims are usually surprising. So you don't always have that money just in your back pocket ready to give them. B, if the claim ends up costing less than your deductible with SIRs, you don't always get that money back. Now, when it comes to typical deductible costs, pretty standard in the industry, and we have pretty standard. Ours are $1,500, $2,500, or $5,000. Now, there are pros and cons for getting a lower one and a higher one. With a lower one, like $1,500, your premium every year is a bit higher. But when I say a bit higher, I'm talking $150 annually higher than let's say a $5,000 deductible. So with that higher deductible, you're able to save a little more year over year. But ultimately, if you have to pay that $5,000 deductible, you're talking tens of times more expensive. It would take you 32 years to pay the difference had you had a $1,500 deductible. And you said
70 to 80% are meritless claims. So, on the 80%, 80%. Okay, so 80% on your end, 80% you find that are meritless for errors and omissions. Correct. So out of that 80%, what is the average cost that somebody that's using your insurance is paying towards those claims if 80% are meritless? Is it close to zero? Or are they paying a little bit? Or are we able to mitigate that risk down to less than the deductible more often than not?
So I don't have an average number that inspectors are paying per claim, but I do know for a fact that we have gotten over the past 5 years really, really good at closing claims for either $0 or less than the deductible. And that for our claims team, that is the goal. Our claims team only works for us, that team of attorneys and adjusters. It's a big team. They only work with home inspectors. And because of that focus and expertise, we've really gotten into a rhythm of being able to do it really well. Now, obviously, it's not a guarantee because depending on the nature of your claim, there could be a lot of leeway in there. Obviously, a meritless claim is often better and easier to defend. I will say, though, depending on how good of practices you implemented during that inspection and after, like, did you take pictures? Do you have a solid agreement? Those things can actually make a really profound difference. Because, for example, a really common type of claim is you're accused of something that wasn't a defect at the time of the inspection. So yeah, that problem's there now, but when you inspected the house 9 months ago, it wasn't. Well, the easiest way to prove that is you have a picture of the thing then, and we have a picture of it now, and we can show, hey, on inspection day, that area was perfectly fine. And here's the photo to prove it. Now, if you don't have a photo, that's a lot harder to deal with. So a lot of the variability has to do with like what we call your inspection assets, that agreement, that report, those pictures that you were able to maintain, and then how quickly you get it to us. One of the reasons we've gotten so good at stifling meritless claims is because we started our pre-claims assistance program about 6 years ago. And for us, a pre-claim is any complaint you get that isn't a written demand for money yet. So if you just get an angry phone call, if you're getting like a text, but it doesn't specify like an amount of money they're wanting you to pay on repairs, you can send it to us and we can start helping you try to respond to that thing so it never even gets to a claim. And if we get to respond to it then, we're getting ahead of it. We have, for us, 85% of our pre-claims never turn into claims, which is pretty amazing. So if we can stifle it at that point, pre-claims assistance is free. We're not even talking about your deductible
Just
yet.
for using you, we get the customers will get pre-claim assistance for free. And you brought up another great point. You talked about assets that help you during a claim. That's your agreement, your report. When you start working with a new inspector, because a lot of the people watching, maybe they just started in the business, but they want to grow a big business. Do you guys work with them to tighten up their agreements to make sure that when they come back complaints,
yes, we do.
It's in their favor. It's in your guys' favor to best handle that?
Right. So one of the things that we've realized over the years is that pre-inspection agreements are oftentimes your first line of defense. They start defending you the second your client is reading the thing and signing it. So way before we get into complaints and claims and things like that. So they're really important documents that you should definitely take very seriously. And we take them really seriously. So when you become an InspectorPro insured, we do collect a copy of your agreement. The review of your agreement that we do is pretty preliminary. We just look for some really basic things that could be a problem if you were to get a claim. For example, 3 years ago, the one thing all of our renewal people were looking for in the agreement was if you mention arbitration, what arbitration company are you naming? Because a lot of inspection agreement templates that inspectors were using were naming an arbitration company that went out of business. So we were going in and making sure that you didn't mention that company, because if you did, and then you didn't have like an arbitration company that you were recommending that was in business, then your client gets to pick who it is, and that can be a lot more difficult for you. So our look at renewal time isn't super close, but you can always ask for our claims team to review your agreement. It takes a few weeks for us to be able to do that, but we can, and they'll do a more thorough look at it. Even more exciting though is at the end of this year, hopefully by the fall, we're actually releasing our own agreements, one for every state. Awesome. That It has been a
Yeah,
3-year
I'm sure it's
project.
a lot.
It's
To
exhausting.
do it all for
I have
50
meetings
state,
for it
yeah.
every single week. And I'm only, because I'm the marketing director and my
Yeah.
main thing is writing and editing
Mhm.
and doing all that content. The main thing I'm doing is looking at commas
Yeah.
and stuff like that. There are people with the attorneys that are working on it have much harder jobs reviewing state SOPs, reviewing association SOPs, reviewing case law. I mean,
Well, and that's the
uh,
huge part too,
we
because
were
if you get into
reviewing.
court, and because I have a story where I didn't have errors and omissions. My agreement wasn't the best that it could be, and about 6 years ago, I had to reach a settlement for 18,000. I think it was a little over $18,000, and it was 3 parties that had to settle for the clients that bought this house. The report wasn't wrong, but like you said, they made false claims. In my mind, that I was like, oh my gosh, I did everything within my SOPs and everything that I was supposed to do, but it was cheaper to settle because the court costs started getting astronomical. And it's like, even though they were asking for $500,000 from each party, we agreed to settle because it's like, how much money do I continue to pay the attorneys or just settle? And this is important because, like you said, Stephanie, 80% of these claims that come in are false. We did nothing wrong, but if we don't have a good agreement, if we don't have errors and omission insurance, that $5,000 can turn into $18,000, even when we're right, because of the court costs. It's just insane. So,
There's a great article
I hear
on our
everything
blog.
you're saying.
It's the only, yeah, it's the only guest post we've ever allowed so far. Written by a guy named Randy Stipe, who was a former ASHI president, who begged us to be able to write this article because he had a similar situation. He was insured with us at the time, but he writes an article basically on, how he was grateful that in his circumstance, we ultimately settled, and why that was important. Because his situation was getting to be similar, would have been really, really expensive to basically defend his pride and say that, he was right. It's funny because insurance companies, one of the reasons sometimes people don't carry insurance, or one of the reasons insurance companies have a bad rap is, people assume that the insurance company's first move is always going to be to settle. It's for us, and I can't speak for other providers. It's not. We look at the thing and we work with you and we advocate for you and figure out what makes the most sense, not just now, but in the future. Something a lot of people don't know about is one of the things that you need to consider during a claim isn't just how that claim ends for you, but your future insurability. And what I mean by future insurability is one of the things that insurance providers look at when they are going to write your business is they look at your claims history.
Mm-hmm.
So they look at whether or not you've had claims, but they also look at the amount that they ended for. So even if you're not paying the $100,000, you just pay your deductible. The insurance carrier cares if you have a claim that closes for $100,000 versus $10,000. They will see those claims that close for larger amounts as indicators that your business might be a greater risk for them to insure.
Right?
And in a worst case scenario, that carrier says, it's not worth it. I'm not going to insure this person. And we have a lot of relationships with really great carriers. Almost every time we can pretty much find somebody that will write you.
Mm-hmm.
But if you get into a situation where you have a really negative claims history, the people that we can find to write you won't let us do some of the things that we're known for, like pre-claims assistance, and they're going to charge you a lot more. So that's another reason why we're always thinking about what's the best, not just now, but for the future. Like, what is our best outcome overall? Because it isn't as simple as just looking at what happens in this particular moment, but we're thinking about, okay, you want to inspect for 5-10 more years. What can we do now that'll give you the lowest premium going forward for those 5-10 years as we find more insurance carriers and different things for you?
No, that's
I think this is great for a lot of our audience to hear, because as a business, side of Home Inspections podcast here, we do want to educate people on, what to be doing going into the future. And I think that obviously insurance is something that should be talked about. And I just want to give you guys a quick shout out for Inspector Pro. If you're at any conferences or events, definitely give them a shout. Go over and talk to them and ask some questions about how this can help your business, help protect your business, take you carry you into the future. But I also want to say that they have the best pens at these conferences and events. And if anything, that is definitely a reason to go stop and talk to the nice representatives at Inspector Pro Insurance.
yes.
We're known for our stuff. I have people. I have people. We do notebooks too, and I have people who will kind of circle around our booth like sharks at the end of a conference. Like, hey, do you have any extra notebooks you don't want to bring home? Because my daughter uses them at
cool.
school,
Oh,
or
great.
I use them
Yeah.
on the job because people really like our notebooks too. We're also known for, we do at our bigger shows, live silk screened
Oh,
t-shirts
cool.
That's fun.
that are a fun kind of like take this souvenir home. And we also do, things that'll actually give you a bit of education about what we do. We have lots of articles, that printed copies of our articles that you can pick up, which are also available
Yeah.
online, inspectorproinsurance.com/blog. And we write about everything under the sun, top claims, case studies of claims. We write about contracts and reports and best practices. Actually, last year we did a 12-part series on provisions that you should have in your contract with examples of what they
Yeah.
look like. We do articles on safety, so like workers' comp type stuff. And just best practices for you to safeguard your business from all sorts of different types of complaints and claims before they happen and when they happen.
That sounds fantastic. We need to take a minute to hear a word from our sponsor, but when we get back, I'd love to dive into Stephanie's wheelhouse, these articles and some of the content she's putting out as the marketing director. I think that we might be able to pick up some great tips and tricks from there. So we'll be right back.
When you run a business, the buck stops with you. It's all on you to figure out what to do next, what needs to be solved, what direction to take. We understand the hardest decision a business owner faces is what's the next move. You shouldn't have to do it alone. That's why we're bringing the best minds in the home inspection industry together for Momentum, a one-day business building workshop connecting you with the guidance you deserve. Register for Momentum today to reserve your spot and take advantage of our early 50% off pricing. Click the link to register.
All right, we are back with Stephanie Jaynes, the marketing director of InspectorPro Insurance. And Joey and I are really excited to talk about some of the articles that Stephanie has produced with InspectorPro Insurance, because I think that it's worth it to go check these out to learn about things that you may not have thought about being, a home inspector in business here. And so, Stephanie, I want to ask you, what are some of the best tips and tricks, or what are some of the best articles by topic that someone should go and check out that could really help them protect their business or take their business to the next level?
Yeah, definitely. So when it comes to protecting your business, we have a little something for everybody. We publish risk management content 3 times a month. And a lot of the focus is on claims that we're seeing recently and how you can prevent them in your own business.
That's great.
So the first place I recommend people go if they are just starting to get into this and figuring out how to manage risk within their own business is, we have a category called top claims. And we took over 10 years of insuring home inspectors, all of that data, and we broke each claim down into a category. This is about pests. This is about radon. This is about water damage. And then we totaled each type up and figured out what our top 5 claims were, and then ultimately our top 12 claims were. And then we published individual articles in a series on, hey, how do you prevent mold claims? And the reason why those articles are so helpful is we know from being in business so long that we're not getting new types of claims every year. It's not like home buyers and homeowners are coming up with new reasons to sue home inspectors. It's the same stuff every time.
Yeah.
So if you nail down how you can protect your business against those specific types of claims, you're going to be in a much better situation to just safeguard your business, but also to grow your business as you hire new inspectors and are figuring out exactly how to train them and what best practices they should be implementing to avoid lawsuits. Those are really great resources for you, especially because sometimes they're simple things to do, but they're not things that you think about. A good example is we did an article on the top general liability claims in the industry. And one of the stories that we shared was a claim that was almost hundreds of thousands of dollars, but thankfully we were able to close for nothing. It was an instance in which the GFCI shut off, and the client, or no, not the client, but the seller happened to be a scientist who collected rare seeds and had 3 giant industrial refrigerators full of extremely rare seeds in the garage. So when the power shut off and the inspector wasn't able to turn it back on, a bunch of these seeds died.
Oh,
And each seed was worth thousands of dollars.
wow.
And the solution to avoiding a claim like this is if you trip a breaker or the power and can't get it back on, make sure that you don't just tell your client, who's usually the buyer, but you communicate it to the seller,
Yeah.
who might have things that need to get taken care of.
Wow.
And it's not enough to just write it in your report, because people don't necessarily read the report immediately. You need to be on the phone with these people so that they can intervene. And that is a good way to prevent these types of things from happening. So yeah, we have tons of articles that include stories like that you can learn from and then grow from. When it comes to more about growth and bettering your business, we're actually doing a series right now for the ASHI Reporter on ancillary services. So these are services that you would add on to your standard inspection, like pool and spa inspections. I'm writing one for September on energy audits. These are all like ancillary services that you could consider adding to potentially bring in some more revenue, to diversify your business from competitors, maybe even to protect your business from inflation or economic downturns by having, more types of services that you can offer. And what's nice about these articles is we interview home inspectors, ask them about their experiences offering these services, what they recommend to inspectors, from how to start, what technology to invest in, what education. And then we also, because we're risk managers and insurers, we talk about, okay, now that you're offering mold inspections, what are some things you need to be adding to your agreement, your report, things like that, to avoid these types
I love
of
that. I
claims.
love that you keep the inspector in mind, and as they grow, you're giving them articles so they can learn from and implement and reduce their risk. Everything that we've talked about, I feel like we've gone through as a company, we've spent money on, we've wasted dollars on, that could have been avoided probably just by reading your blog. So I guess my next question is, because not only do we have a lot of single inspectors that want to grow, but we also have a lot of multi-inspectors who are growing, and maybe they don't have the cleanest business, maybe they don't have the strongest agreements. So what does it look like from your perspective in InspectorPro Insurance for these multi-inspectors? What are some things that they can be doing? What are the costs? Because I know that some insurance companies, they'll add an extreme amount per inspector to your premium. What does that look like with InspectorPro Insurance on your guys' end, and how do you help multi-inspectors reduce claims?
Sure. So when it comes to calculating rates for insurance, there are some standards, and then some providers do some additional things. Standard throughout the industry is your rate kind of starts with the amount of exposure you have, which is a fancy word for saying how much money are you bringing in and how many inspections are you doing. So when you're a multi-inspector firm, you are going to be paying more for insurance because you're making more money. That's the bottom line. Now, you can save some dollars by pairing up with a provider who doesn't charge a per inspector fee, and that's something we don't do. We don't charge per inspector because we actually haven't seen a direct correlation between the number of inspectors and the number of claims. So there isn't a reason for us to be charging more, so we're not going to. Really, the thing that we have seen with multi-inspector firms is the only reason that claims might bubble up is, with every additional inspection you do, your risk technically is going up. So the more exposure you have, the more likely you're going to get one. That's just innate, and that's true for single inspectors too, for sole proprietors. But something that is unique to multi-inspector firms is making sure your processes are the same across the board. The reason we sometimes see multi-inspector firms getting into trouble when they maybe don't have to be is if they're not training their inspectors to do the same things, say the same things, go through the house in the same way. There was a recent instance in which a multi-inspector firm had a claim for something that the inspector genuinely missed. And it was because they didn't have a good protocol for walking the house, and the inspector just literally didn't look at this area. And from that, this multi-inspector firm learned, okay, we need to really up our training and make sure that our guys are all doing the same things, all saying the same things, all writing the same things in the report, because we're going to be more likely to miss stuff if we're not consistent. And continuing to train on those things consistently every year. It's not enough to hire somebody and be like, here's everything I know, do it this way, and not revisit those topics again and again. It's really important that if you're an owner of a multi-inspector firm, you are training your employees to inspect the way you're inspecting, and that you're revisiting those topics again and again. And every time you introduce new technology or new services, you have to kind of restart that process again with that new technology or those new services. One of the easiest ways to get a technology related claim is if you're using that technology differently across inspections. A good example would be your company uses infrared technology, your camera sometimes and not other times. And not because a good way to do that, if you're interested in saving time or making more money from owning an IR camera, you could say, hey, I'm only using my infrared camera if you're paying that additional fee for it. Great. But that better mean you're not making exceptions to that rule. Because if you're using an infrared camera in one inspection and then you just happen to forget it one day, so you don't use it in the next one and you get a claim for that one, something that can be brought up when we're defending your claim is, okay, well, why did you use it in house 1 and not house 2? If your answer was a whim, it's not good enough. You need to be really or that your one employee prefers it and the other doesn't, especially if that technology could have exposed that defect. You're in hot water.
That's awesome.
Absolutely. So I just want to reiterate something that's come up in some past episodes, that this is the age of data-driven decisions. So I do want to point people towards Stephanie's blog at InspectorPro Insurance, because I think that, if they've curated the top claims for you, it just makes sense to go educate yourself, take a look, and see what you're up against, because we have to make data-driven decisions. And if they've collected the data for you, it's just too easy to do your due diligence and go check it out and learn a little bit of something. So that's one plug I wanted to give you guys. I love that you're doing that blog, and it sounds really great because I think there are a lot of tips and tricks people can pick up from there.
And also, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely true to, it's important to learn from other people's
Yeah.
mistakes. We didn't make the same one.
Yeah.
And
And it's important to just learn from, experience. And when you can learn from not just your own experience, but other inspectors' experience, that's really powerful.
Empowering for sure.
In our blogs, we do try to interview inspectors all across the nation. So you're going to have people who relate to you. We have inspectors who have made moves to other states and have consulted our blogs and purposely looked for inspectors we've interviewed in their areas so they're better equipped to deal with, how risk can sometimes differ by geographic location because of things like weather and level of litigiousness and things like that. So it's definitely a great resource and it's free. So even if you're not insured with us, it's good to log in and go on there. And if you want those updates straight to your inbox, we have a newsletter. We send it out twice a month. Get signed up on the newsletter. The sign up is on our
I
website.
love it.
So that you can
This
get
has
it.
been great. And guys, for those listening, you want to make sure you're going with an insurance provider that's going to fight for you to avoid you paying a deductible or anything at all. I think that's one of the most valuable things that you've said here, Stephanie, is that you fight for the inspectors. You're not just taking the deductible and just settling. You're actually trying to avoid them paying anything at all. And what that does is that, one, it helps you out. Two, it keeps you insured for a good dollar amount. And you want that. And the blogs too. Make sure you guys, or we as companies, are doing our due diligence and making sure that we're protecting ourselves before we even get to the insurance, making sure those assets are good so they can take what we have in place already and further protect us, which is valuable. I mean, when we were talking about in the beginning of some of the issues that inspectors face, as a company that's been around 20 years, we go through that, I almost think, like yearly, stepping through attics, doing all those little things that could probably be avoided. Tripping a GFCI, even though we communicated to the buyer's agent and they said they would communicate to the seller's agent, they're still coming back at us and saying, oh, there was $500 worth of meat in the freezer. I think we had an incident like 2 weeks ago that was something exactly like that. And we're like, we marked it defective in the report that it didn't trip. It's just valuable stuff. So read up on the blog, listen to this podcast over and over, because this is very important, and this could save us thousands of dollars a year for our business. So we really appreciate you being here, Stephanie, and providing your insight and sharing with us your information and the blog that you're putting together for InspectorPro Insurance. It's invaluable, and we just really, really do appreciate what you're doing for the inspection industry. We love that. So thank you so much for taking the time and being here with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. We love working with inspectors. Like I said, we've been doing it for over a decade. And we only work with inspectors. We're not working with appraisers or real estate agents. We're not selling car insurance on the side. We really dedicate ourselves to this so we can do it well and dig a little deeper, like investigate in the data that Jake was talking about and focus on really serving our clients and being there when they want to call us and ask us questions because they're about to hire another inspector or they had a complaint and they just want to know how to deal with it differently. So we're definitely a resource. Definitely reach out to us when it's time for you to renew your policy and you're thinking about making a switch to us, or if you have questions about risk management and things like that, we're available and we're really happy to help. And we have information that we want to share so that ultimately we can kind of change like the litigious nature that surrounds the home inspection industry. Because as a large insurance provider that has a big impact on the industry, we have the power to help do that, which is why we are sharing so much information. It helps all of us if claims become less frequent and less costly. So we're excited to lead the charge on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. That is awesome. You've been a great asset today, and I'm sure you will continue to be. So everyone go check out the content that InspectorPro is putting out there. And, thank you, Stephanie. We'll definitely have to see if there's anything else we can get you back on the show to discuss.
Anytime. We didn't talk about workers' comp at all. So if you want to talk about safety sometime,
all right,
we can do that too.
Absolutely. We can definitely get a safety episode in there. We'd love to have you back on. But so thank you, Stephanie. Thank you to our audience. Just before we go, I want to give a quick shout out to everyone who's hopped on our brand new Instagram. Joey's been doing some Instagram lives and some Instagram stories for some episodes that are coming out. Stay tuned for those. You get to see Joey's beautiful face and hear some nice messages from him. And yeah, thank you, everyone. Please, if you're loving the show and you haven't done it yet, please like, subscribe, share, whatever you can do to help us grow and help us in our mission to get valuable information to business owners that just happen to be inspectors here. We're trying to help home inspectors, continue on into the future and grow their business. So thank you very much to everyone helping us in that mission, and especially you, Stephanie. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
All right. We'll see you next week. Joey and Jake of the Inspection Pro Joe podcast look forward to seeing you at the Inspection Super Conference at the Bellagio Hotel in Las Vegas, Nevada on September 27th to October 1st. For more information on the event, check out inspectionsuperconference.com.
Thanks for listening to the Inspection Pro Joe podcast. If you haven't subscribed, go ahead and smash that subscribe button. And don't forget to hit the bell so you won't miss our next episode. This episode was produced by Jake Aronson. This has been a Pair Payments production.